Zero knowledge proofs actually remove the need for trust. That's actually the value that they're bringing to
Exactly.
the world. And that's why our tagline is now zero doubt, right?
Hello, innovators, entrepreneurs, and risk takers. Welcome to another episode of Web3 with Sam Kamani podcast. And today on this podcast episode, I'm interviewing John from Horizen Labs, where he is the VP of product, and he is going to be sharing with us what they are building at Horizen Labs and how they are using zero knowledge technology. And in this podcast episode, we talk about what is zero knowledge proofs and what is ZK tech, how it is used, what are some use cases, what is overhyped in this industry, and what needs a lot more attention. We talk about all things to do with blockchain, crypto, Web3, where the industry is moving, and why do we need zero knowledge tech in this space. As always, nothing that we talk about in this podcast episode should be taken as investment advice. And please, as always, please like, subscribe, and follow. And with all that out of the way, let's get into it. So, John, welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to interviewing you, especially knowing about Horizen Labs and what you guys are building. I find it super interesting. But my first question is around how did you get involved in all things to do with Web3 and blockchain?
I'm sure. And very nice to be on with you. I really appreciate being on here and being able to talk to your audience. My story in Web3 starts in roughly 2021. I was working for a pretty big commercial bank here in New York City, where I'm still located. We'd gone through, obviously, the pandemic time period. I was working at home and I'd gotten really over what I was doing at my old job. I was a product manager for this like loan risk rating platform. And I really wanted to get into something related to sports betting. And for whatever reason, I actually couldn't find exactly what I wanted there. And I happened to come across a job posting for Horizen Labs product manager. And it actually fit my credentials quite well and decided to give it a shot. One of the nice things about it was there was some travel involved in going to Italy, and my wife is Italian and I really love Italy. And so I was, why not give it a shot? I didn't really know anything about blockchain at that point. And they gave me a shot and I've been here ever since. It's been about 4+ years now that I've been with Horizen Labs. And that was my first intro to crypto. And I really got into NFTs that summer. I've moved past that since then.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me a bit more about Horizen Labs and what you guys are building. And the second part of that question is what problems are you guys solving?
Yeah. So when I joined, the company was primarily working on Horizon, which at that point was privacy focused blockchain, but it was also focused on scaling the blockchain horizontally through a zero knowledge proof protocol, where essentially you would have the Horizon blockchain at the center and then all of these side chains around the outside of it, which were meant to prove all of the transactions in the side chain in a recursive manner, and then post the verification of singular aggregated proof to the main chain, which had a verifier in it, again, in order to scale horizontally. We went on a bit of a winding path since then. We did some projects in the ERC20 NFT world where we
Yeah.
launched a couple of tokens for people. We've migrated Horizen away from that old, it was a Bitcoin based architecture that recently migrated to Base. And there's a whole new sort of like privacy focused, compliant privacy focused ecosystem starting to be built around that. But the project that I primarily work on is called ZK Verify. And that's, again, this common thread of zero knowledge proofs is threaded through all of these different things that I've talked about. That's where I'm focused right now. And it's really meant to be I don't like to use the word or term modular because I think it's a little bit hard to wrap your head around for lay people, but it's a blockchain dedicated to verifying zero knowledge proofs in a very super efficient and super fast and cheap way.
I know you might have done this earlier as well. And we have done this on the podcast in the past, but not for a while because I haven't interviewed someone from the building on zero knowledge side in the last 20, 30 episodes. So I wanted to ask you this question is like, how do you describe zero knowledge proofs to someone new to tech or someone outside of blockchain and Web3?
I've actually had a couple of iterations at this recently, so
Yes.
hopefully it comes across pretty good. But the example that I usually give to people, I want to prove to somebody that I'm over the age of 21 or 18 because I want to do
Yes.
something without revealing my birthday. I think that's like a little bit of an old example and it's just not that interesting. But the example that I've started to use recently is this like thought experiment where there's a cave and it's a circular cave. So it's not a sphere where it's hollow in the middle, that's filled in the middle. There's a path in a circle. And at the middle of the circle in the back, there's a secret door. Well, a door that has a secret password that's required to go through it. And I want to perform an experiment with you where I want you to prove to me that you know the password to the door without actually telling me the password. I am blindfolded. You walk into the cave and you pick a path left or right. You walk in and you say, okay, or I know you walked in. If you say, okay, I'll probably know where you are. But after a few seconds, I turn around and I say, hey, Sam, I want you to come out of, and I pick the left or the right path. And if you went down the left path and I say, come out of the left path, obviously, you don't have to go through the door. But if I could say, go through the right path, come out of the right path, you have to go through the door and come out the right side. And that on its own doesn't actually prove anything. Like if I just happened to ask you to come out of the same path you went down, you wouldn't have to pass through the door. But if we repeat this experiment hundreds, even 10 times, right? The probability that you and I have selected the same path starts to drop off significantly. And if you repeat this experiment 100 times, it goes even significantly more down to close to zero. And that's the idea here with zero knowledge proofs is they are probabilistic to a certain, I think most of them are probabilistically. I can prove something with a very low chance that this is not incorrect. But that's the idea here is we want to gain certainty about something without me having to trust the other party in that thing where I can actually like view from interaction that something is or is not true. And so obviously a lot of the sort of use cases that people talk about right now or have talked about in the past are related to privacy, where you want to keep something secret to yourself, like the secret password or your date of birth or your social security number or something like that. And if you were to try to prove that you're a US citizen or some other citizen of another country. But to me, some of the more interesting use cases are where you're trying to prove something to somebody so they don't have to go back and check to make sure that thing is actually true. So they don't have to go through the computation again in order to verify the truth or that a statement isn't true. They can just check this proof very quickly and gain a complete understanding of what the situation is without having to go and recheck everything. And that's the example of zero knowledge rollups, which are maybe the most widely adopted use case for zero knowledge proofs right now. We're moving a lot of transactions off of Ethereum. But in order for Ethereum to have this connection with these ZK rollups, they have to prove to Ethereum that they've executed all of the transactions that are happening on those L2 solutions exactly the same as they would have on Ethereum. And they do that via zero knowledge proofs where they don't have to everything. They just have to check a proof and they gain certainty that all those transactions were valid.
Yeah. What is the benefit of moving them out of Ethereum?
So going back to the early days of my experience in Web3, Ethereum was my favorite platform. And I mentioned before that I was doing a lot with NFTs. And I remember a couple of times I tried to do like a live mint, and the actual gas costs that it would take me to mint this NFT were more than the NFT actually cost itself. And I remember we actually worked on a project within the Bored Ape Yacht Club ecosystem where they launched a bunch of NFTs, and the amount of gas that was spent on those NFTs was astronomical. And so the whole reason the gas costs go up is because there's a lot of people trying to use the network at the same time, and there's only a finite number of resources. It's the same as trying to go order an Uber when it starts pouring rain outside. Everybody wants to call an Uber at the same time to get home, and the charges to actually take that ride go through the roof. So the idea is spread these transactions out on these other layers in order to decongest the main layer so that you're not getting charged more than your transaction is worth to just submit the transaction to the network.
Yeah, fantastic. Makes sense. And how would you define like the product vision for Horizen Labs over the next, say, 1 to 2 years?
Yeah, so I'll focus like mostly on ZK Verify here.
Yes.
We do have our mainnet kind of launching here in the next couple of weeks, incredibly focused on that. So the product vision originally for ZK Verify was we were looking at all of these ZK rollups and taking a look at how much gas it actually consumed to verify the proofs that are submitted to the L1 in order to guarantee all these transactions are valid. And depending on the frequency with which these rollups were submitting these proofs, they'd be burning $60 a transaction times hundreds of transactions a day. It was actually a lot of overhead that they had to, it was a lot of overhead to keep these rollups running with just the proof verification piece of things. And so we had this idea that like we saw a trend with data availability where a lot of the data availability for Ethereum was moved off chain with products like Celestia, where you're still using Ethereum for transaction execution and settlement, but you're using Celestia, a dedicated blockchain for storing, essentially guaranteeing that you can go back and retrieve data if needed. You're seeing this sort of trend in the data availability space. And we said to ourselves, well, why can't this be the case for almost any function that Ethereum does? There's execution and settlement, data availability. We said, why can't we create a separate category for proof verification? So we started building this blockchain that's entirely dedicated to simply verifying zero knowledge proofs. Those proofs can come from anywhere, whether you're in the Web2 world and you want to verify a proof on a blockchain that has guaranteed uptime, guaranteed censorship resistance, guaranteed fault tolerance, or whether you want to verify it on Ethereum and you just need to verify a proof type that for whatever reason can't be verified on Ethereum. Maybe the cryptographic precompiles aren't there, or maybe it's too expensive to do what you're trying to do at scale. A lot of the use cases that we're envisioning are super high volume and high frequency use cases.
Yes.
And as we already mentioned, the more you flood Ethereum with transactions, the higher you're going to pay in gas costs. And so that was the original sort of vision here. And we've seen a good deal of adoption. We're very happy with what we've seen so far on our testnet, especially over the past month or two. A couple of new partners coming on. And so we need to get over this sort of major milestone of getting to mainnet, launching our token. But after that, we really want to continue to make sure that the network can withstand the super high volume of proofs that we expect to see start to be produced via applications, whether they're in Web 2 or Web 3, as ZK technology continues to get more and more efficient and more part of the daily workflow for people using whatever applications they're using. So a lot of it is on increasing throughput, increasing efficiency. We've also done a little bit of exploration of the rest of the ZK development stack, if you will. So there's a bunch of things that happen before a proof gets generated. There's a bunch of things that go into actually generating a proof. And then we're at the very bottom of the stack. And so we may start to explore places above us in the ZK stack, but nothing like super nailed down in terms of what we're going to work on immediately following launch, except for expanding capacity and expanding efficiency. I think those are the two things that we would benefit most from focusing on. And beyond that, we have a bunch of ideas. It's just a matter of doing some product discovery work and seeing how people are interacting with our platform and then solidifying the priority of those things. I've seen a little bit of that on mainnet.
In an ideal case scenario, what type of companies or products would interact with your platform?
So we have an interesting, I brought up Celestia before,
Yes.
and I think our product is very similar in that I would almost categorize Celestia as like a B2B type blockchain as opposed to a consumer facing blockchain. Like we expect our blockchain to almost live in the background, and you may not even know if you're interacting with an application that generates a proof and it's verified on ZK Verify. You may never even know that ZK Verify is in the mix on that. So we are like B2B type blockchain, which I think is a little different than most other blockchains. And the real sort of like value add that we can provide is we have pretty significant scalability and we can handle a large variety of proofs and a large volume of proofs all at the same time. And so I'm imagining, I would love a world where I could imagine a decentralized exchange, for example, or maybe a high frequency trader is trying to do a bunch of different arbitrage trades. And all those trades need proofs for whatever reason. Maybe the trader is trying to keep their trading strategy private. And so that would generate a significant volume of proofs in a very condensed period of time. And I think that's exactly what our blockchain that we've been building for quite a while now is very well positioned to do, because it does no other functions other than verify proofs. And the underlying cryptography, the verification modules that we've built are super optimized to making sure that we can verify proofs effectively as fast as they enter the network. So it's not a specific sort of example of what types of use cases, but it's like a category of high volume. You could think of like logins or proof of personhood, for example, where, you know, in aggregate, I don't know, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people may be logging into applications at any given time. And so something like that would also be an incredible use case for this type of blockchain, because again, it's hyper efficient, hyper cheap, can actually accommodate a use case that people take for granted, should be free, and effectively is free by verifying it on this blockchain that we've built.
Yeah, that sounds, yeah, that sounds very interesting. You know how, like, for over the years, we're always told that there is a trade off, whether it's like between the cost, speed, and security, or even decentralization, like four things that you have to sacrifice one for the rest. Does that trade off still exist after technologies such as zero knowledge proofs and all the new things that have come out around in this, whether it's roll ups or other things? Yeah. So, first of all, does that trade off exist? And then the second part of that question is, then what is the hardest part of this trade off to solve?
Yeah, I do think it's hard to say if blockchains in their current iteration will ever really get away from this trilemma where you're
Yes.
going to have to trade off at least one or two things in order to spike on another dimension. The reality is blockchains are networks that require gossiping amongst different nodes in the network, or connections between different nodes in the network, and passing messages between the nodes to effectively perform consensus and guarantee a transaction is actually valid and should be accepted by the network. And so I don't think you'll ever see a complete eradication of this blockchain trilemma, just because it's kind of part of the way the platform was meant to exist, right?
Yes.
But zero knowledge proofs do provide extra guarantees. And the whole reason, again, that these ZK rollups can even exist, because at the end of the day, ZK rollup is just, in most cases, a singular node that's accepting, or a few nodes that are accepting transactions from a bunch of people that are trying to do something. And if one or a few of those nodes fail, like, you're not guaranteed to have 100% uptime and all that kind of thing, right? But what the zero knowledge proofs do guarantee you in the case of these ZK rollups is you can guarantee that your transaction, the state of your accounts can be posted to Ethereum, and you can exit your ETH at the very least from the ZK rollup to the L1. And so there are additional sort of security benefits that you get from that. But you are trading off the decentralization aspect and maybe to a certain extent security. Again, even depending on how your ZK rollup stack is built. I think one thing that kind of gets swept under the rug with a lot of ZK rollups is, or a lot of ZK proofs in general, there's a distinction between ZK Starks and ZK Snarks. ZK Snarks are much smaller in terms of like how much memory they take up on your computer and are faster to generate, but they require, in some cases, a trusted setup. And what that means is you get a bunch of people together and they each contribute something to like a key, and then they have to discard that. And essentially that helps you like efficiently compute over. I'm a little out of my depth here, but there's this trusted ceremony that requires a bunch of people to do something, and you have to trust them that they're doing that thing the right way. ZK Starks are much bigger, but they don't require this trusted setup. They're quantum resistant. And so like in a lot of cases where you're relying on ZK Snarks, you are still trusting certain people to have done something. And in almost all cases, I'm sure that there's good reason to trust those people. And there are public like statements of how the ceremony was done and certain guarantees, but you can't completely wipe out some of these security concerns, I think, that do exist still. And so I would argue that, getting back to the original question, no matter what, you're always going to be making trade-offs. It's a matter of what things are you
Absolutely.
comfortable with and what are you not comfortable with at the end of the day. And different use cases will require different levels of security versus decentralization. What we've found thus far is that a lot of people, I think, given the still semi-nascent state of ZK tech, it still takes a long time to generate proofs. It still takes a lot of
Yes.
computational power to do that. I think people are willing to make trade-offs in places that hopefully in the future they won't have to because the tech has gotten a lot better.
Yeah, that's very true. I was just thinking that as you continue to scale Horizon Labs, and whether it's on mainnet or all the other things that you guys are building, what challenges do you anticipate that you will face the most in, say, in the next 1 to 2 years as you guys scale?
The biggest sort of like scaling issue that I think we've seen is that, again, this zero knowledge proof space, maybe it's a little disingenuous to say that it's still like early or nascent, but the technology is still very rapidly evolving and it's very rapidly changing and also getting better. There are new like proof types that come out all the time. And what this means is builders who may need to come in and try to build an application that generates a proof, they may be interested in learning a new proving system and generating that proof a different way. And one of the issues that we've seen is we have to keep up with this rapid sort of iterations of all these different proof types that are coming out. Even within certain proof types, like we've actually built a verifier within the blockchain to verify risk zero proofs, and risk zero, I think just yesterday launched their token for Boundless, which is their prover network, but they're iterating through versions within their proof type very quickly. And so in order to accommodate some of the needs of our customers or our potential customers, we've had to like prioritize certain adaptations of these verifiers over others that we maybe want to add. So I think like the fast-paced sort of environment is one of the issues that we will likely run into. We've run into it
Yes.
already. Some of the ways that we tried to build in order to mitigate those issues from coming up, we actually built our blockchain with the same underlying tech as Polkadot's blockchain. It's called Substrate. And upgrading the actual runtime or upgrading the actual
Yes.
software is quite straightforward. You obviously have to do the technical work, but
Yes.
once you want to actually implement that on chain, you simply upload this new runtime, which is pretty small. All the nodes download it. And as soon as governance vote goes through or a call is made to upgrade all these nodes, they all switch to the new runtime. And there's no need for like hard forks or anything like that, where you have to coordinate across validator, miner nodes and RPC node providers and all these other people. So I think that's one of the bigger challenges that we have faced and will continue to face. And I think the other one is just zero knowledge proofs haven't really hit mainstream adoption. I think we're starting to see glimpses of them in different places. I think Google announced recently that they are implementing some kind of zero knowledge proof within their human and age verification product that they provide. But I think we still really haven't seen these hit like mainstream, or if we have seen them hit mainstream, we definitely don't know about them. So that'll be another thing that will likely sort itself out. And
Yes.
we're trying
In due time. Yes.
to build with our own tools as well and demonstrate
Yes.
what can be done. But I think it's a matter of time.
Yeah, very true. And I have seen that. Like just the other day, I was interviewing someone and they didn't have a client, they didn't have a customer for one of the AI products. So they became their own first client and used their own tool and showed the gains in productivity and other things, whatever they were building. And that's generally the way. The thing is that if what you're building is not even useful to you, then what chance do other people have of using it? Which is around like the whole the ethos around product market fit. And that's how I also see that you have to build something first that you use it yourself. And just talking around this whole topic of mass adoption, not only around ZK, but around Web3. I'm very bullish about it. We all are very bullish about this whole adoption of blockchain and crypto and decentralized tech. But what do you feel like is still missing for Web3 to hit mass adoption?
It's hard to say fully like what, I don't know. I haven't really thought too much. I've been living so like entrenched in the CK space and really thinking about like what's stopping that from
Yes.
being adopted. I haven't really come up for air on the Web3 side, but I think it's still just so hard for people to wrap their minds around. I was talking to my father-in-law a couple weekends ago. I think it was 4th of July weekend. And he was just like,
Yes.
what does it mean to mine a Bitcoin? What even is a Bitcoin? Like, it's still so hard for people to wrap their minds around this like idea that currency and value can be entirely digital and it can be entirely represented through cryptography and private keys and public
Yes.
keys and all that kind of thing. That I I think with stable coins, with a lot of focus on stable coins, with some of the things I've seen coming out of like Coinbase and
Yes.
the base ecosystem in terms of, I think they announced yesterday they're doing base pay and all these other sort of things that are going to be similar to Apple Pay. I think you'll start to see people maybe not understand it to the degree that they hopefully would, but at least accept it more as a like legitimate form of value and currency and transfer of value between two parties. So I do think it's partially a couple of those things that I said, but it's also like these big institutions that are getting behind crypto now. You've seen all these treasury companies that have come up, and won't opine on whether I think those are good or bad thing, but I think they are helpful in just bringing crypto into the top of people's minds. Now, hopefully there isn't another crazy sort of shock to the system like there was with FTX and all and Luna and all that kind of thing. And hopefully that doesn't push crypto back to the back people's minds. But I do think like a lot of these institutions coming in, starting to do things on chain is really going to also help. And so I also think it's just a matter of time with crypto and Web3 as well. So yeah, I don't really know if I have a firm or great answer for that other than just have to wait, and hopefully Coinbase continues to develop the way that they have been, and that
Yeah.
continues to keep crypto top of people's minds and experimenting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you mentioned around like even the example of your father or that like it's hard for people to get the concept of just digital currency, even though everything is digital, all the money they use, most of it, 99% is digital. Everyone gets paid just in a bank transaction. Money doesn't really exist apart from zeros and ones on a centralized database. People haven't even realized that fact, even though they deal with it. And then the second fact is around the decentralization, because money has been, or any form of currency has been so centralized for so many centuries, starting from kings and queens having their face on the currency to this day, whether it's centralized by a reserve bank of the country or federal government of the country or central government of the country. So it's a very interesting concept, and someone has lived with it for the whole life, and to explain to them that no, now that centralizing authority is not human, it's maths. It's that itself, and it's a very big ask, I feel, for most people.
Absolutely. Like the unfortunate thing also is like the things that made Bitcoin unique and valuable are kind of things that the industry has continued to get away from and has seen it, you know what I mean? But like, if you think about it, the argument for crypto versus traditional bank, right? It's
Yes.
like any day that bank could go away and just get wiped out. They could lose all their money, whatever, and all your funds could go away. Now there's FDIC insurance in the US and all that kind of thing. So there are some stopgaps for that. But the argument for crypto is like, assuming there is an incentive for somebody to continue to mine or secure a network, you're guaranteed to never lose your funds, right? And as long as you don't lose your private keys, insured value can go up and down. We've gone through, I think, a couple of issues. Like if you think about Luna, FTX, those sort of
Yeah.
things that happened back in whenever it was 21 or 22,
It's-
like people did see their money go away. And so that definitely didn't do very much in the way of
yeah.
convincing people like this is the way forward. And now you also have like these meme coins that pop up out of nowhere and create value seemingly out of nowhere and then go to zero very quickly. And so I think like, that's what I mean when I say the fundamentals that this whole industry was created on have been warped a little bit as we've gone over time. And so we do have to do a little bit of soul searching and figuring out how to maybe reclaim our place in people's trust sort of
Yes.
circles.
It is a trustless environment. And it's just like this is such an interesting conversation, I feel like, because there are pros and cons of every system. And one of the pro of complete decentralization is the speed of innovation. is much higher because there's no gatekeepers. You can just build straight on the blockchain. You can just read the data. You don't have to wait for the software provider to provide API access and all that. And then you can only do those things. But at the same time, that means that any bad actor can do whatever they want because there are no bounds and checks. So it is such an interesting debate on how do we balance this. But I still am very bullish in the long run because just like with ZK verify or like zero knowledge proof, you should be able to make the whole system a lot more democratic anonymously and provide the benefits of decentralization, such as speed and innovation, without the drawbacks of too many bad actors trying to exploit the system. So, this is a idealistic view.
I agree with that, by the way. And I say all this like still fully believing in Web3 and still fully like that's
Yes.
why I'm actually super bullish on ZK Verify. And it's interesting that you brought that up. So like we've been having a bunch of internal debates recently on like what should the tagline for ZK Verify be? We just relaunched and rebranded our website, and we were talking about like trust and like verifying trust and all that kind of thing. And I
Mm.
was like, guys, the reality here is zero knowledge proofs actually remove the need for trust. That's actually the value that they're bringing to
Exactly.
the world. And that's why our tagline is now zero doubt, right? You're removing the need to trust somebody. You're removing like any doubts that you might have. If you're able to verify the proof and you know what you're verifying, you have a guarantee effectively that if you verify the proof and it returns like yes, for certain that thing is true, that person is who they claim that they are, that person is over 21, whatever the case is, there's no need to trust anymore. And I think that's hopefully the next iteration that we get to is removing the need to trust all these authorities or trust that people are doing things in everyone else's best interest. You would be able to guarantee a certain level of certainty about whatever the sort of situation is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And going on the other side, what do you feel is like the most hyped thing in blockchain or in crypto at the moment?
Yeah. I was thinking about this earlier because, and spoiler alert for everybody, I did see a couple of these questions before, but I say this and I'm going to have to caveat it in a second. I think maybe prediction markets are in the Web3 space, the most overhyped thing that exists. And I use prediction markets every way, but I use Web2 prediction markets. There's this
Mm.
app that I use for sports betting, which I really highly recommend. I won't plug it here, but I use a Web2 version of prediction markets. And I think that they don't really benefit that much more by being in Web3 than they do in being in a traditional Web2 world. And I've seen a lot in prediction markets. I'm bullish on prediction markets in general, but I think that maybe some of the regulatory mode that things people like Kalshi have in the
Mm.
US at least is going to go a long way in maybe securing prediction markets, at least in the short to medium term for Web2. We really need to figure out like what the value add for prediction markets, besides the fact that it's decentralized in Web3 really is. I think there's a lot of like things that could still go wrong in like a fully decentralized, fully trustless world that maybe we need to think a little bit more about in the Web3 space before we claim that as like, this is the next big thing for Web3.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Internally, we believe it
yes.
might be like keeping your trades private. And I think that could go a long way, but that does like, potentially slow down the process of being able to trade. Like the value of prediction markets is you're able to take a position and then trade that position immediately thereafter. And if it takes a little while to generate a proof for whatever you did, because you want to keep your position and your identity private, that sort of use case kind of goes away a little bit. And so I think there's just a little bit of time that we need to figure out our sort of business case in the Web3 space for prediction markets. So
Absolutely.
hopefully
I'm
it's,
just thinking over top of my head, you could potentially build on top of prediction markets and you could potentially sell or leverage your prediction once it's been done, or maybe stake the future reward or do lots of other innovation if it is completely decentralized and on blockchain, which might be a lot more challenging in the web 2 world. But this is just thinking out, like already prediction markets are complex, and on top of that adding more complexity, it might remove a lot of people from adopting it. So that's always been the issue with our industry, that it is too complex for any mere mortal on the, like, any random person. It's so hard. You can't talk about ZK proofs with your Uber driver, but you can talk about like what they're betting on, not TAB, but I don't know what's the, like, fantasy sports or things like that. A lot of people do that and they would understand that. So I agree with you.
AB is the betting company in Australia, right?
Yeah, Australia, New
Yeah,
Zealand, and UK, TAB is the betting company.
gotcha.
That's the Web2 world. Every market has a different one. It's just that I've lived like last 25 years in New Zealand, so I'm familiar with this side
Sure.
of the world.
Yeah, I'm a big sports betting horse racing guy. So I do
Yeah.
a lot. I use prediction markets every day, probably more than most folks do. And the situation you described is an incredible value add to anybody like me who does this on a regular basis. So maybe the composability of blockchain is the value add, and maybe
Yeah.
I'm overthinking it. I also like to be a little bit controversial, but
No, that is true. It is true. Like in the current stage, I was thinking that maybe you should make a poll on this on Polymarket, like, is our prediction markets overhyped, and see how people vote on both the sides. Yeah, but I'm kidding about that. But
yeah.
anyway, coming back to ZK Verify, and you guys, like, what's on your roadmap for the next, say, 1 to 2 years?
Yeah. So I think, again, like most important sort of next steps for us are continuing to expand capacity for the network. We believe in the future of ZK. We believe in a world where there are trillions of proofs generated on a yearly basis, maybe on a daily basis. We'll get there one day. So if we believe in that world, we know for certain that Ethereum and even all the rollups that exist in the Ethereum ecosystem probably can't handle that many proofs. So therefore, we believe in this alternative verification layer that we've built out in ZK Verify. And if we want to continue to accommodate and grow that sort of our slice of the pie, we're going to need to increase throughput, capacity, the scalability of our network. And so that's like the most immediate next step for us. From there, I think we do want to start to explore, there are some solutions that could be related to the things that I just said around proof aggregation. So instead of verifying one proof that represents one thing, you represent one proof which represents 50 different proofs. That's the value that you get in all of this stuff being based on math and cryptography. Is you can aggregate, bundle all these proofs into smaller, more succinct proofs and post them on chain. That could be a route that we go. We may want to explore other parts of that ZK stack. Like, do we want to get into proof generation? I don't think we do, because there's a sort of big market for that already. We've seen 2 projects recently launch tokens in that space. And so maybe partnerships are what we're thinking there. But we also want to branch out into kind of like product development with respect to zero knowledge proofs. I've done some little experimentation with AI tools where I built out a couple of small applications just to, again, demonstrate what can actually be done. One of those apps was like a blackjack game where you can essentially verify that the dealer started with an ordered deck, full ordered deck of cards, 13 of each suit, ace through king, or 2 through ace, however you want to. And when you're dealt the cards, you're dealt a fully randomized full deck of cards. And you're certain now that you're playing a game where the odds aren't stacked against you, even more than they already are, right? Because the house always wins. So I'm not saying we're going to get into sort of like gaming and that kind of thing, but we do want to explore how could we build apps that Horizen Labs could potentially monetize that utilize zero knowledge proofs for fairness, for privacy, for reducing uncertainty, gaining certainty, removing the need for trust in certain things. And so there's a bunch of different directions that we could go there. So I don't think that's 2 years out.
Can't think 2 years in this industry. It's so
Yeah.
hard. Anything more than 1 year to 18 months, it's even 1 year. The whole industry changes and so fast.
Absolutely. And you need the flexibility to pivot. And I remember beginning of this year, everyone was AI. Now it's become prediction markets.
Yes.
Who knows what it'll be next?
And stable coins.
And stablecoins. Stablecoins, I think, have been the only sort of like consistent thing that we've seen maybe for the past year. But then there are these hype cycles that come in and out, and it's just
Yeah.
very hard to always be in the zeitgeist of what's going on if you have like a 2-year long roadmap that says everything you're going to do and that people hold you accountable for, right?
Absolutely. So my final question around that is, in order to achieve this, everything that you have talked about on your roadmap, do you guys have ask? Is there anything that you guys are looking for? Are you guys looking at hiring? Are you guys looking at more builders to come and build on top of your tech? Are you guys looking at raising funding? Anything, feel free to share.
Yeah, I'm going to avoid going into fun. Like, absolutely would love that. So, like, anybody that's listening, feel free to reach out. I think, like, I'm very product focused, like, I'm very
Yes.
consumer and developer focused. And so, the big thing for me is I would love for people to follow our X handle. It's at ZKV protocol. Get involved in the discussion around zero knowledge proofs and what we're building on ZK Verify. If you're a builder, we have plenty of tools, one of which that I didn't even really talk about, but it's an API product where essentially we've abstracted away all the need for setting up a wallet and holding crypto in that wallet. And we allow you to send proofs just via API to our blockchain. So we're trying to streamline the developer experience. Get in touch with us, read our docs, join our Discord if you need help on certain things. A little bit of non-public information, but we are launching a grad program. It's not really non-public information. We're launching a grad program very soon. So if you need funding, definitely apply to that grad program and we can have a
Awesome.
discussion about that. And yeah, it's really just get involved. Like
Yeah.
we are not building this blockchain for Horizen Labs. We're building this blockchain as a decentralized community-owned platform. As a token holder, you'll have the right to vote on certain things, whether that's how treasury funds are spent, which runtime upgrades get applied to the network and which don't, potentially tokenomic related things. And all of that, by the way, happens fully transparently on chain. So there's like a call to action there too. And so, yeah, I think it's just involvement and people talking about the project and developers coming into the ecosystem and experimenting with different things. There'll be a lot of resources to support all these different things. So do not hesitate to ask, and we'll definitely more than open to having a conversation about it.
Awesome. What I'll do is I'll leave links to all these things in the description, show notes, or comments so people can reach out, or even other things that we talked about. So thank you so much, John, for your time today. And I think Robert has been on the podcast, your CEO, ages ago. And I can see how Horizen Labs have changed to reach newer heights with everything that you guys are building. And we'll definitely have to do this again in like 6 to 12 months and see where you guys are, especially after your mainnet and everything. So thank you once again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening or watching this episode of the Web3 with Sam Kamani podcast. By now, you know the drill. Leave a comment or share this episode with a friend and leave a review. I would love to hear from you. So that's why my DMs are open. Reach out to me, especially if you are a founder building a product in Web3. Then I would love to hear from you. What are your challenges? Is there anything that I can help you or my community can help you with? Thank you once again and wish you best of luck in building your startup or your project.